We think everyone can acquire language. Everyone can pick up language subconsciously. Children acquire their first languages. Children acquire second languages. Adults acquire language. The ability to subconsciously pick up language does not disappear when you enter school. It does not disappear when you become a teenager. It doesn't disappear when you get older. It's with us forever. We think the language acquisition device never shuts off. Very different from acquisition is what we call...
Welcome back to CUIN 4320. This week we will continue exploring second language acquisition concepts. Now that we have an idea of how people learn their first language and how people learn in general, we will be analyzing the core theories that fuel second language acquisition. It's time for Module 3, Second Language Acquisition Part 2, the Monitor Model. This module is titled after Stephen Krashen's Monitor Model. However, the reading this week covers more than just Krashen's seminal work. In addition to the Monitor Model, the text also introduces Noam Chomsky's Universal Grammar, which was hinted at in last week's overview. I believe that if you have not heard of the theory of universal grammar prior to this course, you will find this segment of the reading very compelling. Later on in your reading this week, you will also learn of John Schumann's acculturation model. John Schumann is a social linguist that connected culture with second language learning. He breaks down his theory into different factors that affect what he calls social distance between two cultures that can result in impacting the success rates of second language acquisition. Make sure you pay close attention to Schumann's acculturation model, as you will be asked to reflect upon it during your assignment this week. The chapter we're reading calls Krashen's work by its original name, the Monitor Model. These days, it's often better known as the input or comprehensible input hypothesis. The reason this is because that the model is a set of 5 different hypotheses of second language acquisition, and the input hypothesis became the most impactful of the 5. For me personally, the input hypothesis has had a great impact on my own teaching, not only in second language education, but also in my instruction of other topics. You will need to understand all 5 hypotheses in detail in order to complete the assignment this week, so make sure you pay close attention when you do the reading. Krashen's 5 hypotheses are as follows. Number 1, the acquisition learning hypothesis. Number 2, the monitor hypothesis. Number 3, the input hypothesis. Number 4, the natural order hypothesis. And number 5, the effective filter hypothesis. All of these have been extremely impactful to the field of second language education, except maybe the natural order hypothesis. I will be going over a few of these and leaving the rest for you to uncover. First off, let's talk about the acquisition learning hypothesis. This hypothesis suggests that there's a very clear and unmovable distinction between language learning and language acquisition. Let's listen to Dr. Krashen himself give an example of the distinction.
We think everyone can acquire language. Everyone can pick up language subconsciously. Children acquire their first languages. Children acquire second languages. Adults acquire language. The ability to subconsciously pick up language does not disappear when you enter school. It does not disappear when you become a teenager. It doesn't disappear when you get older. It's with us forever. We think the language acquisition device never shuts off. Very different from acquisition is what we call learning. That's what most of us did in school. Learning is knowing about language, conscious knowledge of language. In English public schools, for example, we learn that a noun is the name of a person, place, thing, or idea. We learn that the subject and the verb are supposed to agree. This is conscious language learning. Language acquisition and language learning are very, very different. In fact, I think very different psychological processes are involved. Of the two, acquisition and learning, the research has been telling me that acquisition is far more important. Here's how we think they interrelate. When you're about to say something in another language, and it's easy to see in a language you don't speak very well, if you can put yourself in that position. When you come out with a sentence easily, it comes from what you've acquired, not from what you've learned. All the rules that you learned in school do only one thing for you. They act as a monitor or an editor.
Learning the rules of language often has more of a negative effect than positive. With more grammar rules present in a language learner's head, the more it impedes the learner's natural flow. This is because every time they speak, they monitor what they're about to say by scanning it through all the grammatical rules that they have previously learned. While yes, it can make it so that the L2 learner can use the language in a quote-unquote correct way, the monitor ultimately impedes other aspects of language, such as fluency, spontaneity, and general communicative competence.
To begin my presentation this afternoon by talking about what I think is the most important issue in language education, the most important question, and that is, how do we acquire language? And I'd like to...
Also known as the comprehensible input hypothesis. The input hypothesis is probably the most influential. Once you hear it, you may think it to be common sense, but keeping this hypothesis in the back of your mind will be beneficial when you create your own lessons in the future. Before I talk about the input hypothesis, first watch this demonstration from Krashen himself.
Here's lesson number 2, and for this you have to watch me carefully. Das ist meine Hand. Verstehen Sie das? Hand? Everyone say, ja, I can hear you, even though it's a TV audience. Good. Kopf. Das ist mein Kopf. Verstehen Sie Kopf? Ja? Gut. Kopf. And here I'll draw a picture now. Kopf. Ist gut, ja? Schön. Kopf. Das ist Mr. Spock, ja? Mr. Spock hat 2 Ohren. Ohren. Verstehen Sie Ohren? Er hat 2 Ohren. Okay, Mr. Spock. Ja? Ach, nein. Entschuldigung. Okay. Augen. Verstehen Sie Augen? Augen. Wie viele Augen? 1, 2, 3 Augen. 3 Augen. Ist das richtig? 3 Augen? Nein. Wir haben nur 2 Augen. Mund. Verstehen Sie Mund? Und hier ist eine Zigarette, ja? Nein. Zigaretten sind nicht gut.
Okay, now that you've watched that video, I want you to ask yourself, did I understand what he was saying? If you already speak German, obviously ignore that question. But most likely, you said yes. But he was speaking German the whole time. How were we able to understand him when he was speaking a foreign language? Well, yes, there are many grammatical similarities between English and German, and cultural ones too, which goes into the culturation model. The real main reason that we understood him is because he made his lesson comprehensible. Comprehensible input is often displayed as a mathematical formula, I plus 1. I plus 1 is likely a reference to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, which we covered in the last module. I refers to a student's current input or interlanguage level, and the plus 1 refers to a level slightly above that. What that means is that when you're formulating your lesson, the content of the lesson must be made slightly more advanced than the learner's current ability in order to maximize acquisition. If the difficulty level is below I plus 1, then the information is redundant. If the difficulty level is above, then the lesson no longer becomes comprehensible, and students will not be able to efficiently absorb the information. So in summary, this means that students can only learn if they're able to comprehend what they're being taught. Hence, comprehensible input.
We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages. We call this comprehensible input.
I haven't talked about the natural order hypothesis or the effective filter hypothesis. I leave those two for you to read in the chapter this week. And make sure you do read all about all these hypotheses as they are required for this week's assignment. Which leads us to this week's assignment. This week's assignment is Discussion Board 3. Discussion Board 3 has 2 questions. The first one is on Stephen Krashen's monitor model. It consists of 5 interrelated hypotheses. Please explain each of the 5 hypotheses and talk about how these hypotheses have informed your future teaching. Make sure, when you explain the 5 hypotheses, put them in your own words. Number 2. What are the implications of Schumann's theory for teachers working with ELLs? Also, please don't forget to read your peers' posts and choose one to respond to. Again, at minimum, a paragraph in length. Next week, we will begin to look at our textbook, Techniques and Principles in Language Teaching, by Larson, Freeman, and Anderson. So if you do not have the textbook yet, this is the last reminder. You need the textbook to be able to continue on in the course. In Module 4, we'll begin looking at the various different approaches that have historically been used in second language education, beginning with the grammar translation method and the direct method. See you next week.